officially.
I'll do it. Demita Beck-Taylor.
I am here.
Robert Deal.
Here.
Dale Grimes. John Harvey.
Here.
Patrick Grenier.
Here.
Jeff McCormick. Jennifer Moody. Emily Stutzman.
Here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So welcome to our new folks. Thank you guys for being here, and thank everyone else for being here as well. Looking forward to a few items that we have to talk through this meeting. First, we're going to have some updates from Jen and the team. We have 2 new board members joining us today, so we'll give them a few minutes to introduce themselves shortly, and then after that, we'll get into our key order of business, which is reviewing the 23 plan and the 24, the 23 annual report and the 24 master plan, excuse me. So our first order of business is going to be approving the minutes from our last meeting. So I'd like to request a motion to approve the March 30th, 23 meeting minutes.
So moved. I move to approve the March 2022 meeting minutes.
23.
23,
Yes.
okay.
Perfect. Can we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we will call those approved. Okay, and then John, is it okay if I call on you first? Could you just give folks a brief introduction of yourself, where you're coming from, and a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is John Harvey. I moved to Berry Hill in 2015 via New Jersey. I've been trying to get involved in the town over the last several years. I ran for commissioner this year and lost by a very small margin. And just whatever the town needs from me, I kind of wanted to be there for them. And they asked me if I would be on this board. So here I am.
Awesome, thank you so
Thank you.
much. All right, and Patrick, same.
Hi everyone, my name's Patrick Greiner. I'm a faculty member at Vanderbilt University. I live in Midtown Nashville. I've lived here since 2018. I teach at the university public policy and environmental justice, environment society issues. I'm also involved in the Urban Green Lab and a few other initiatives around Nashville. And so I was very happy to be asked to be part of this board. So thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much, and welcome again, and thank you for serving. We greatly appreciate that. So I will turn it over to Tara for a legal update.
Okay, as far as legal update is concerned, I was asked about the status of the Southern's expansion. And I can't recall the last time that we did an update, but the good news is that the court has sided with the board that the expansion would be inconsistent with our plan. The appeal time has passed, so this case is essentially closed.
Okay, thank you so much. Jen, back to you.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to go over, you'll see the presentation scrolling on your screen. I'll go over the annual progress report, as well as Clay Hand will also go over some of the numbers that we have. So first off, just to reiterate what the annual progress report is, it was, we have the 1991 Solid Waste Management Act requiring the counties to have solid waste regions. Those regions are then required to create a 10-year solid waste management plan for that region, and then those plans are to be reviewed on an annual basis and approved by the board. So this board in 2019 approved the Zero Waste Master Plan, and then on an annual basis we are reviewing and approving that along with all of our stats that we have and all this data that we collect. So in your report that I've provided all of you, both a hard copy draft as well as in PDF form, this is just a rundown about what's in there. There's a section on about the solid waste region boards, all of our administrative contacts, 10-year plan update, which this year we don't necessarily have a specific update to the plan. And then we go into all of the data we've been collecting for 2023, and that's the calendar year 2023. So residential recycling and diversion, county infrastructure, operations. There's a couple questionnaires in there, and then the meat of it, the landfill report and the recycling report. So we'll jump into the landfill report, and I'll turn it over to Clay, and we'll tag team this section a little bit.
All right. TDEC provides us with these numbers in their solid waste annual report, origin report, and it tells you where the waste went, where it was finally disposed. Middle Point had more this year than last year. Then you look at West Camden, they had less. So in the end, there was about 42,000 more disposed of this year than last year. Some get more, some get less. It just varies how the waste is moved around. And then the C&D waste, which is construction demolition, this year it was about 74,000 tons less than last year. Southern Service took quite a bit less. Bi-County took a little bit more than last year. But in the end, 32,000 tons were disposed of in the ground less, although we don't count the C&D waste as part of the reduction. You know, we reach out to a few different companies in the area that do private recycling, and this year was a little bit less than last year, but that also could be because in past years, TDEC will give us a collection of local, or not local, but chain stores like Target, AutoZone, Publix, but they haven't, since they have a new system, they're entering that on their own, and so we haven't seen what those are. A lot of times they'll enter stuff after the report has been submitted. And this is what Metro collected, what we have control of. And we had a little bit more than last year. It's probably the wood waste went up about 10,000, so that's probably a lot of the difference there. Probably storm related, but it's hard to say. But you know, again, some things go up, some things go down.
Before we get there, just a couple of other notes on the landfill and recycling report. So as Clay said, we don't necessarily have all the data that we get from TDEC. They often are entering that much beyond when we put in this report. So those numbers will likely shift, but we at least have a good set of data that we've been able to collect on our end that's represented here in comparative to 2022 versus 2023. The other thing to note is that based on our census data, our per capita diversion, again, as Clay said, our diversion requirements from the state are for diversion from municipal solid waste landfills and do not include construction demolition landfills. Of course, our zero waste master plan asks for diversion from all landfill by 90% by 2050, but for the state's purposes and their reporting, our diversion is just, they're gauging it on just the municipal solid waste landfill. Based on our the current data that we have and that calculation, we are not quite meeting that diversion requirement, that reduction, but the state calculates it in multiple ways, and in the past, however other ways they calculate it, we have typically hit that mark. So we're not concerned that we're going to hit that diversion mark again this year. Although it was interesting to see that Nashville's population did decrease a little bit based on the data that we received. I would have thought the other way So that's the recycling report and the landfill report. So I do want to provide you some updates then also on progress that we've made with the Zero Waste Master Plan over the past year. I'm really pleased with the work that myself and my staff and Waste Services has been able to do to accomplish some really big goals. This year, primarily, really want to highlight our food scraps pickup pilot program. So this was a program, of course, in the plan, moving towards a system where we have curbside food scraps collection is a big part of the Zero Waste Master Plan, as 1/4 of all of our waste going to landfill is organic material that could be composted. And then 1/3 of residents' waste is compostable material as well. So as part of that goal, we were provided a private donation of $250,000 to be able to implement a 750 household pilot program. I mentioned it last year just briefly because we hadn't started it, but it officially launched in October 23rd of 2023. And so we've had, I was hoping to get, I haven't gotten last week's data, so this is 1 week behind, but we have collected so far 52 tons of material, which is really exciting, as when we compare that to what we're collecting at our public drop-off locations at our convenience centers. We're collecting in just those 750 households twice as much food scraps and organic material from the curbside program as we are from that drop-off program. So it is demonstrating that it is valuable for residents. We've also noticed that the contamination rate is less than 1%, which for recycling, it's 23%. So clearly people are understanding a food scraps program more so than they understand recycling, which is understandable. Recycling is incredibly complicated and has become more so. But we're just really pleased with all of these numbers and how it's going and how it's been received. The mayor also did have he supported us in a press announcement as well, and so has been really excited about the program and recently touted it at Earth Day last weekend. So really pleased. It's almost 6 pounds per household per week, which is a lot. But still really exciting because all that's being kept out of landfill. The goal with this program at the end of the year is for us to develop a feasibility plan to expand to our service area, to a wider part of our service area for Metro curbside collection. I will also note that we did receive notice last week. What's today? Tuesday. Okay. Yeah, last week that we received a TDEC grant for $100,000 for organics management. So our donation funding ends in October. But what that means is that we're going to be able to extend the pilot beyond that and have keep it going while we do that feasibility study. So really pleased about that. Other milestones for the year, every other week recycling. When I first started was right after, I think, Sharon Smith announced that we were going to every other week recycling in 2019, 18, very long time ago. So of course, you know, we had COVID, we had so many things going on, bankruptcy of our trash collector. So we were able to launch every other week collection in January 30th of 2023. We have been pleased to see that. It has been very successful, very positive reaction from residents after we got through some of that early hiccup phase as we learn new routes and things like that. And we're also seeing the tonnage increase as well of the material that we're sending to the recycling facility while not increasing our contamination rate either. So that's really good. Also, we have talked in the past about construction and demolition waste. This is a huge part of our Zero Waste Master Plan, a big focus. We have done a lot of work in the last few years, and in 2023 we got to the point of being able to put together a piece of legislation that did go to Metro Council that would require diversion of construction and demolition waste. That came at the very end of council's session, right before that entire new council started. And so as a result, it ended up being deferred indefinitely, but that just means that it can still come back. It was just deferred for that council session. So we are working on doing some additional stakeholder engagement and public engagement before we bring that back. But we are hopeful that we'll be bringing that back to you with hopefully an approved piece of legislation before our next annual meeting. and move that forward. And then we also had, this was spearheaded by the mayor's office with municipal leadership on food waste. So we work very closely with the Metro Mayor's office on all of these issues and reducing waste. And food waste continues to be a big priority for us and for them. So they did file a resolution that creates kind of I consider it a midterm goal of what our zero waste, basically halfway through our zero waste goals, to get some diversion going sooner on food waste, and that's for, all of municipal metro government. And then also I wanted to note, while we have not necessarily implemented new software yet in terms of route management, we have approved the ability for us to move forward on route management. Right now, we just use paper maps. So getting some software available for our staff and our drivers to be more efficient, to reduce missed pickups, things like that, is huge for customer service. And so that is something that was heavily worked on in 2023 and was approved early 24. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts our operations moving forward, I'm sure in a very positive way. Okay, education and outreach. So this is my last slide before questions. Just wanted to note some of our education and outreach statistics. We do a lot of different things for the public in terms of educating about how to recycle right, how to compost, what programs are available to residents in terms of proper disposal and waste reduction. We also, so on the left-hand side, we have our online reach, so that includes things like our website as well as our app. We've seen a nice increase in the usage of our app, especially as we went to every other week recycling, and more people using the Waste Wizard tool to search up materials, which is really exciting. And then our in-person reach has jumped significantly this year. I think it more than doubled in terms of how many people we reached in person from 2022 to 2023. So really excited to see that. My team has worked really hard and really gotten out at a lot of different events at farmers markets, Tomato Art Fest, things like that, doing trainings for Metro government employees, all kinds of things. So really pleased with all of that. And so that is a really quick update. So if you all have any questions about the report or anything mentioned in the presentation, happy to answer any questions.
I've got a question about this House Bill 1021. It seems to hamstring us to some degree. Is there a plan for trying to approach the state governments and get rid of that restriction?
That's a... Yep. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not in the loop. I'm happy to go back and regroup and get and let you guys know where that stands. I'm not sure if the department might be more on the ground or. We work very closely with the state on the policy that we're creating. We have not necessarily engaged the state on that particular policy outside of mention of it in the APR. There has been a few instances at the state level of looking at opportunities to create some statewide regulation around, so just for everybody's reference, the legislation that they're talking to is basically the ban on bans, right? Memory, excellent. And so basically, like, we could not, from a local standpoint, we could not provide regulation on plastic bags, on any kind of packaging, whether that's a ban, or even just saying that there would need to be a deposit or something like that. And so this is really, when we get down to the kind of that, in the Zero Waste Master Plan, you have the few strategies that'll get us some really good diversion. They're a big bang for your buck. But when we start getting further down, there are these certain items, and especially single-use plastics, that is, if we can control those, we can really get to that zero waste goal. But right now, because of that state law, we're not able to do anything
regarding those. So what we have done is we have done some consideration around how can we be creative about incentivizing reduction of single-use plastics. But ultimately, when we look at our waste characterization study, single-use plastics don't make up a significant portion of the landfill compared to some of the other materials that don't have state bans against policy that we can make. So like construction, demolition, and food waste, we just have, those are bigger bang for our buck, and so we focus there. Sorry, anything else? Okay.
I have a couple of questions. So could you help us understand why C and D is not included in the tonnage reports? You said C and D was not included in
as the state,
reporting?
in terms of the state requirements. Would you be able to answer that question? I've asked Sharon Smith to come up and answer the question.
I'm honored to be here. So when the state passed the 1991 Solid Waste Management Act, the goal was to reduce waste, going to municipal solid waste landfills. So their focus at that time was just reducing waste going to solid waste landfills and not necessarily anything to do with construction demolition. And part of the reason was they were trying to motivate a lot of the cities and counties that had their own county-owned landfill to try to divert more of that, what we like to call putrescible waste, the stinky waste, from landfills and try and focus more on waste reduction. So they don't, the C&D is not considered part of our goal, but it's also really interesting to see how it moves over time. So we have always tried to track it and present it to the board, even though from the state standpoint in the APR, it's not necessarily relevant.
Thank you.
And I'll add too, just a note of an interesting trend that we're seeing is that, and we saw it this year, significantly less C&D in C&D landfills, but a lot of that material we've heard is being diverted to, well, shouldn't say diverted in this group, but being sent to municipal solid waste landfills, so not diverted in our sense, but not going to those construction demolition landfills because there's not as much space or much availability. So we're seeing a lot of that material in MSW as well, just as a note.
That's helpful. You made a comment about potentially not meeting the diversion holistically. What would be the consequence should that happen?
That's
so you should have just sat on this side.
No.
So generally speaking, the state's very forgiving of stuff like that. We've pretty much always met it, and we probably will this year because they, like Jen said, they have more than one way of calculating it. And large cities that do a fair amount of recycling usually do meet that goal. But the worst thing that could happen is we would probably not be able to apply for any grants or any state funding. But they don't, banish you to, a cell or anything. Although, I guess they could.
Thank you. And then a few questions about the food waste pilot. So I know you said the gift will expire in October this year. And then the grant will kick in there. I know you guys are thinking about doing the feasibility study, but once that grant, the funds for that grant are expired and the funds are not, if there's no other grant funds or private gift funds that are there, what would be the plan to maintain that?
So after the feasibility is done, let me jump back. So one thing that the grant does, and I will also note that we've made an investment request as well within the budget to ensure that the pilot continues on through the end of the fiscal year to maintain consistency, because the ultimate goal is to complete that feasibility study so that we can make recommendations for that next budget cycle in FY26. So the intent is for there to be an ask there, but what exactly that ask is will be based on the data we collect in that feasibility study.
Okay, and then if, I guess at the expiration of that $100,000 amount, would those 750 households continue to be serviced, or would there be a service disruption because of a funding component?
There is the potential for there to be a service disruption. That's my goal, is to not do that. We've seen in other cities where that's really detrimental, New York in particular, where they have stopped and started their food scraps program, and then it just reduces public confidence in those programs. So that's why we're really hopeful that we'll be able to continue moving it forward. But if there is not the funding, either from the general fund or from other grant sources, which of course we will still look for, then ultimately, yes, we'll end up having to suspend that service.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about, kind of piggybacks on the food waste collection. I noticed that there's a need to upgrade the facility for food waste composting with the increased demand that, that clearly is there. And notice the number of people who wanted to participate in the pilot was vastly exceeded the number of people who could. So what are we thinking around the food waste facility?
Yeah, so currently the only facility is Compost Company out in Ashland City. They have a significant amount of space to expand. So those are some of the conversations that we'll be having, and will be also part of more of an in-depth feasibility study to understand how much space do they have to expand. I've had some preliminary conversations with them, and they're confident that I don't think immediately that we could expand to all 140,000 households that have our trash service, but I also don't think that all of those 140,000 households may want that service. So there's some room there to discuss. We've also definitely explored, part of the Zero Waste Master Plan recommends anaerobic digestion. That is something that we have had some conversations about. We were hopeful to do a pilot. Unfortunately, timing didn't work out for us to be able to do that in terms of co-digestion with Metro Water Services and with their facilities, their wastewater facilities. But that is something that we're also exploring. And we're always looking at potential for new implementation of new technology as it develops, and encouraging other folks to be able to start composting facilities. But I think in the short term, we have, there will be the capacity to expand. But long term, we'll need more.
Any other questions?
All right. Oh.
I have a question, but you might not be able to answer it because I think it could be a bit specific. But thinking about HB 1021 and your grant questionnaire answer 3, specifically the no wrap equipment and in the recycling process for sorting, for trying to keep plastic bags out of the recycling process. I was just curious if there was any sort of sense of how impactful plastic bags are in terms of disrupting the recycling process, generally speaking, to get a sense of like how much is HB 1021 actually costing us, I guess. And then also if you had a sense of how much no wrap equipment would actually cost in terms of like grant pursuits.
Yeah, so we have our contractor, we don't have a facility, it's owned by our contractor. So, I mean, it would be a significant cost. It would allow that material potentially to be collected. If they were to invest in that kind of equipment. One thing that we have noted in our contamination audits that we do on an annual basis, plastic bags are far more of an issue from an operational standpoint for the facility because it wraps around the equipment. They have to shut it down, cut it out, and they have said that that can happen up to multiple times a day. So it's more on that operational perspective and being able to get the throughput of material and increase material. But from a contamination standpoint on our end, it's actually, there's not a lot of weight in those materials, which is part of the reason why I mentioned earlier that particular bill is something that, while yes, it will impact that ultimate goal of zero waste, it's not the biggest bang for our buck at this moment, at least with some of those plastic materials. However, I will say glass in particular is one thing that we are also restricted as a result of HB 1021. And so, for example, downtown, honky tonk glass recycling, if you remember that, and trying to be able to collect that glass or restrict glass downtown. It's a huge amount of material, it's heavy, and it's highly recyclable. But it's not being collected and it's all going to landfill. And we have explored but not been able to really do anything about that in downtown as a result. So I would say glass would be a huge benefit if we were to be able to restrict.
Mm-hmm. Any additional questions? I did have one. Back to the food waste piece. I know this is focused on the household components, but do you have any sense of how much tonnage that would come from a commercial space? And is there any appetite for commercial spaces to do the food waste recycling?
That's a good question. I'll definitely reach out to Compost Company and Compost Nashville to get a better sense of that, because I don't have a super strong sense. I know that there has certainly been some appetite, but from a financial perspective right now, because costs are difficult, I would say, for smaller businesses. We're definitely seeing more and more businesses be interested and start collection. But beyond that, I don't know that I have a great sense. There would be significantly more material, I think, coming from the commercial sector, especially when you start looking at like Whole Foods or some of these large retailers that produce a lot of food waste. It's definitely something that would be a huge impact on diversion if they start composting.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. If no other questions, we can open it up for public comment.
All right. I know we have one public comment. Come on up. All right, so is there like a button? Is there Nope.
That one?
Don't touch the three dots.
I won't
don't know
touch.
what it does.
I touched the three dots.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
All right, so we have public comment. You'll have 3 minutes.
Oh, before, I had asked before the 3 minutes, I wanted to make sure, because I got acronyms, and before we go ahead and I lose you all, I gave everybody a copy of this. So you're going to hear 3 acronyms: TWRRA, which is Tennessee Waste Reduction and Recycling Act, EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, and PRO, Pro. Okay? All right, just as a disclaimer in the front, and I'm going to be actually 3.5 minutes. I timed it, so. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and esteemed members of this committee. My name is Gary Cohen. I'm a Davidson County resident, taxpayer, and by profession, I'm a sustainable packaging specialist. Question number 4 on page 15 of the 2023 APR report suggests a focus on statewide policy initiatives for EPR, extended producer responsibility for materials and specifically packaging. I and many others agree 100% and applaud this suggestion. Therefore, I'm honored to speak on behalf of the coalition that drafted Senate Bill 0573, the Tennessee Waste Reduction and Recycling Act, an EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging bill. TWRRA is sponsored by Senator Heidi Campbell, along with several Republican co-sponsors, as solid waste is a bipartisan issue. As reported, Davidson County in Tennessee spends millions of taxpayer dollars every year on recycling. Yet according to a recent study, Tennessee is ranked 48th in the nation for recycling and landfills over 900,000 tons of packaging waste per year. Obstacles to improve and expand recycling include insufficient funding and staffing. TDEC also lists the need for sustainable funding as a major objective. In reality, Tennessee taxpayers are funding an inefficient recycling system, a system that cannot collect or process the current volume of valuable modern packaging, a system desperately in need of non-taxpayer funding to upgrade, expand, and leverage the existing infrastructure, a system in need of more trucks, staff, and sorting equipment, a system that could be diverting 95% of our glass to Tennessee ceramic tile companies who can use it for their product rather than send it to landfills. The good news is there's light at the end of the tunnel. EPR is a sustainable funding mechanism that transfers the costs of recycling from the taxpayers to the brands, or as they are called, the producers, the companies that ship and sell their products into Tennessee and whose packaging ends up in the waste stream. These companies register with the PRO, a 501c3 producer responsibility organization, and pay fees into the PRO based upon their packaging size, weight, material, and volume. EPR incentivizes them to reduce the packaging. EPR legislation has passed around the world and recently in 4 U.S. states. Tennessee-based Mars and Unilever support and applaud our EPR bill and point to it as a model legislation. They have corporate sustainability goals and need their packaging collected and recycled. They support EPR programs around the world and want to fund EPR in Tennessee. Support like this can transform Tennessee into a leader of recycled materials, take us from 48th in the nation, and make us into the top 10, and we need to share this vision. In closing, EPR policy for packaging will provide the hundreds of millions of non-taxpayer dollars to expand our existing recycling infrastructure, improve our recycling rates, bring recycling equity to all Tennessee residents while adding jobs and economic growth to all of Tennessee. And here in Nashville, EPR will put the millions of taxpayer dollars spent every year on recycling back into Davidson County's general fund. Thank you, members of this committee. Our coalition recognizes EPR is a complex subject that requires much discussion, and we welcome your feedback and support. Thank you.
Any questions? No? No questions? Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Coleman. Anyone else for public comment? And the public comment is specifically for the APR, yes, for this section? Okay.
This is for the APR, the annual progress report. So we have another public comment period for another agenda item as well. So you'll have 3 minutes. I'm starting the timer.
Who's determining the 3 minutes?
We have determined it as is allowed to us by the law that I am escaping me. I'm so sorry.
Well, the board's in,
Determination versus public waste determining this. Because I usually run bump up against the end of it, and there are hardly anybody in the public coming to these meetings, so it just seems kind of silly to be cramming a few people into such a.
I'm happy to answer your questions offline too. If you want to send me an email, I can give you the applicable law here.
Yeah.
Bureaucratic answer. I'm here addressing the board, all 5 members of the board. How many members are on the board total?
We have 8.
8. I thought it got bumped down from 13 down to 11. It's down to 8.
We're in process of filling vacancies.
Is this part of the public comment?
Yeah. So we have made a determination based on that law that we are allowing 3 minutes for public comment. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer.
Okay, so this is why the public is so pissed off at government, because government bureaucrats set the policy, and board members sit there and allow the bureaucrats to do that. And 5 members of really an 11-member board, I could say you haven't met a quorum yet. You got to come back another day with a quorum.
So we have met quorum. And just to be respectful of the board and their time, we want to give you the opportunity of those 3 minutes to speak your wishes to us. So if we could stay on topic, that would be appreciated.
That's time.
This is why the public is pissed off about government. This is pathetic.
Okay, Jen, I believe it's back to you.
Did anyone have any questions? Just wanted to- okay.
All right, so I will request a motion to approve the 2023 annual report and the solid waste management plan.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, now I think it's back to you, Jen.
Okay, so next part on the agenda is to talk about some updates that we would like to make to the Zero Waste Master Plan. So we've had, the first 5 years essentially since this was approved, and in that time have done a lot of work and done a lot of research. And so these 3 particular updates are things that we would recommend to the board to consider adding to the Zero Waste Master Plan over the 2024 year to be included in next year's Zero Waste Master Plan update to the state. So the first one would be the significant amount of work that's been done on construction and demolition, recycling, and diversion research and include those findings and all of the policy development that we've worked on. In particular, the Zero Waste Master Plan had identified a deposit system. We have found since the plan was developed that the deposit system that the strategy was based on was a system that was in a city in California where there's already a state requirement. And so the deposit system only encouraged an additional 10% or so diversion. And so as a result of that research, went in a different direction because we wanted to really capture those lessons learned from other cities and what they've done to be able to develop some policy that made more sense for Nashville and also would encourage a higher rate of diversion. So as many of you know, that's based on marketable materials that actually have infrastructure here and markets here in the Southeast region with the goal to step those or phase in rather requirements around materials that actually have a market to be recycled. Because of course, if you don't have anywhere for this material to go, it doesn't matter. If you want to recycle it, it needs that infrastructure. So this is a way to incentivize that infrastructure and market development. So we'd like to incorporate all of that research and all that we've done into the Zero Waste Master Plan to update those particular sections on construction and demolition strategies. Additionally, the food scraps pickup pilot data, that will be some really exciting findings and analysis that we would like to incorporate as well and make sure that that research is represented in the Zero Waste Master Plan document and what that feasibility study recommends to move forward, as it may not be exactly the same as some of the things you might see in there, but will be based on research here in Nashville. And then additionally, and we've talked about this at board meetings in the past, adding a section on environmental justice to address how strategies will be evaluated and implemented to prevent disproportionately adverse impacts on BIPOC, low-income, and other underserved communities. This is something that is, the board has discussed in the past that was somewhat lacking, and this is an opportunity to make sure that as we evaluate strategies that are in the Zero Waste Master Plan, that we're taking environmental justice considerations into consideration and making sure that that's part of how we move forward. So putting that in a more meaningful way is that. So those are the 3 recommendations that the staff would like to make for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions. I can also leave that slide up if you'd like me to.
I was going to ask if you don't mind.
Okay.
Could you talk through how these would be evaluated?
Could you elaborate?
So, like, if they're added to the plan, how they would be evaluated on success?
That's a really good question. So with construction and demolition recycling, of course, that would be evaluated on, we have, in our current process, we've implemented a reporting program so that we'll be able to, through the permitting process, gather data on the impact and the diversion of construction and demolition materials. So we'll have direct data that will show that material and where it's going, and that it's being captured. So we will have that permit data that's available to evaluate that particular piece of it. Additionally, that policy legislation also requires reporting from construction and demolition recycling facilities to make sure that they aren't just saying they're recycling, but they actually are and have a standard diversion rate. That's something that we heard from other cities that unfortunately that was happening. We recycle everything. So we'll also be gathering that data as well. I believe the policy requires that on an annual basis to remain a qualified facility. So that has a lot of built-in evaluation for it. For the food scraps pickup pilot, that ultimately will be, since it's still in new phases, it's more about adding in the current research findings and that feasibility study. So that will be something that will then in that feasibility study, that evaluation will probably come at that point that we develop that. And then I am totally open on section number 3 on the best ways, if you all have recommendations for how we evaluate that. In terms of the environmental justice piece, I think it's something worth bringing back to the board throughout the 2024 year for more discussion. This, to me, is not something, the other two pieces are things that we've already done. It's research, it's implementing and putting that information in the plan. But number 3 requires definitely some more discussion and how we go about doing that to make sure we're doing it right.
I mean, it would appear that number 3, eventually Nashville's going to have to do something about it, a new landfill. And that is where number 3 really comes into play, I think, that item. So until that eventuality happens, I'm not sure about how to address that topic.
Yeah, so one thing that I have noticed in our work, especially when you look at the construction and demolition landfill in Bordeaux,
Right.
in particular, is that even siting a recycling facility has implications on the community that it is in, and those communities need to be considered because while recycling, we all see recycling as like, yes, we want to see this material diverted, and ultimately diversion from landfill means fewer landfills, which means fewer impact on the communities that surround them. But there are so many parts of this plan that I think it's more nuanced than that. And we certainly saw that with the C&D policy and the backlash that we had from the Bordeaux community for a recycling facility that had nothing to do with, well, it had something to do with the legislation, but it was a private company that implemented that facility. And so I think that there's an opportunity to just have a more critical look at the plan and how we can make sure that we aren't missing some of those pieces.
Point taken, yeah. And one more thing, the food scraps pickup program, as it becomes more widespread, will it continue to have its own designation, or will that be rolled into the composting section, if you will? Never mind.
What do you... What do you mean?
Well,
or are you talking about like with brush or?
Well, that's a point.
I will say we've named the food scraps pickup pilot the food scraps pickup pilot because we are focusing currently on food scraps. But ultimately the feasibility studies, so NDOT is actually the National Department of Transportation. They collect brush. So since we don't manage it, we've been, the pilot program is focusing on just the food scraps, but ultimately the feasibility plan may include evaluating brush as well in the long term. Because there are certainly pros and cons to both types of collection programs. So that's something that we'll just have to look at. I don't know if that helps answer that question.
It does.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bless
Jim.
you.
With these additions, really focusing around number 3, is there opportunity to bring that, if we add it today, is there opportunity to bring it back to this body to review for evaluation studies afterwards?
100%.
Okay.
I would expect nothing less.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. Thank you.
Along those lines, I think that a environmental justice section is maybe not as effective perhaps as a holistic evaluation of the existing plan through an environmental justice lens or framework, which again goes to the point of being able to like maybe keep things as they are now with this addition, but then a future complete evaluation of the existing plan.
Yeah.
Can we add that on
Yeah.
for approval?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So whatever you all decide, the language that you decide to use, if you want to go in a different direction, this was an opportunity to open up the conversation. And so if y'all want us to do something different, I am 100% open to whatever, of course, and whatever you all make recommendations for and approve is what we'll do.
How do you guys feel about taking this idea away for a bit to think about it and bringing back a more holistic idea of how it can be implemented across all components of the plan? Okay.
You You'll need to make a motion.
Oh, yes, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to postpone adding these plan updates to the Zero Waste Master Plan for 2024 and plan for or schedule another meeting in the future where we can come back as a group to think about how this can holistically, this is a very long motion, how this can holistically be applied to the plan. Do I have a second?
Well, are you saying that to not adopt any of the three? Is it possible to adopt two of the three?
I'm comfortable
Or
with
to
that.
add two of the three?
Yeah, I would be comfortable with 1 and 2, and then come back for number 3. I'm sorry, I would redo the motion, but to come back for number 3 to talk through that component of the plan and how it layers on top of all the components. Okay, so I would like to make a motion to approve updates 1 and 2 today with the request to come back for motion 3 to talk through how that could be applied to the plan holistically for 2024.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion
Oh,
carries.
do we need to, we also had a public comment section. I'm so sorry.
On this.
Hold your motion. That
Hold
was
the
my bad.
motion. Open for public comment.
Yes. Is there anyone that would like to do public comment?
I would. I don't know where to go.
Yeah, come on up.
How's it going, everybody?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
We'll take you over to this chair. I'll get you the microphone. All right. And you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jeffrey Ezel. I'm with the compost company that was referenced earlier. We're the guys who run the commercial composting facility in Ashland City, and we provide commercial collection in Middle Tennessee. That is primarily currently in Davidson County. There was a question earlier about commercial interest in participating in these sorts of programs. We currently collect just under 100 locations. Think restaurants, hotels, hospitals, universities, and other institutions. We are collecting at 2 MNPS schools. Compost Nashville, who is collecting for the residential food scrap program, they are collecting in addition to somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 homes, they're collecting at, I think it's 3 MNPS schools. I'm seeing right now a large groundswell and interest from business entities, especially in the Nashville area, who are looking to begin or bolster these programs and expand those into either other locations that are also operated by the same facility, or help spread the word on getting those going in other places. We want to work with really excited people. I'm very interested to hear about the feasibility study and how the residential collection might expand. I'm also glad to hear that is being considered to be included with brush, because at our current capacity, we could probably process around 20,000 tons in a year. We know exactly how we could expand our facility to be able to process in the neighborhood of twice that, so like 40,000 tons in a year. If we were collecting 10 or 20,000 tons of food waste in a year, we would certainly need the brush and that sort of carbon input to be able to appropriately process all of that food waste, because we do not use an anaerobic digester or anything like that. But there is a lot of excitement, and as we all know, there's certainly an enormous amount of food waste out there. But like right now, if you expanded to say 100,000 houses, the houses in the pilot are generating on average 5 1/3 pounds per week per collection. If you multiplied that over 100,000 houses, you're looking at 13,000 tons that it would be generated from that program in a year. So we could do that if we doubled our capacity again, and with 6 months' notice, we can do that, and it wouldn't be terribly expensive, and I'm more than happy to do it. I would start looking around for more wood waste and brush to be able to appropriately process that amount of food scrap material.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Slide back up, Jen.
Yeah.
Just to remind.
There you go.
Okay.
You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. So, most discussions about 3, environmental justice. I can tell you the people who need the help the most are the economically most disadvantaged. They are more blue collar. What is needed to help those folks the most is not debating if we're going to get another landfill in Davidson County, which I don't think we will. It's providing jobs for those people. So what do you do to get those jobs? Well, numbers 1 and 2 just need to be done because we got examples elsewhere in the country and the world that are achieving high results in those areas. And so we just needed to do it, do the best of it, and keep in touch with people like us who are well-traveled and know about some of these places. And it doesn't need to be talked about more. So the way Metro has done this plan is in line with what the landfill industry does, which is talk about recycling, but they don't do it. Okay, that's what Metro is doing. So it's the same thing. We need to be getting around it. Our figures, we got figures, we can present them to you. Job creation is huge with recycling. Compare it with disposal. It's huge, huge. That's what is needed the most by the people who are needy in the town. So you want to do 3, right, do 1 and 2 now. Just go ahead and proceed to do those things. You're going to have to do them anyhow if you want to get to zero waste. So the 2050 thing is ridiculous. I mean, we got enough technology in place right now. We can get there pretty close right now if we package it right. But we don't need to be just spending years just talking about it. And yeah, the environmental justice, create jobs. Recycle, compost, material recovery, the whole set of industries. The board, to my knowledge, and through all the years, has never had anybody on the board who knows that their income comes as a result of recycling. I can't remember a single board member that's ever been on this board that knows that their job is dependent upon recycling taking place. Well, go figure. What are the results? We're going backwards. We're not going forwards on material recovery, which is what the public wanted, and that's what set the process off to begin with. It's a state led to these boards, and the boards were to specialize in getting the job done, and they just haven't. And this is such a disappointment to the public. I can't recommend in good conscience other members of the public take some time out of their time to come and attend a board meeting. So I'm here expressing my frustration with the whole thing. And I want to see for once a board actually function for the betterment of the public and not just sit there, go through motions and, do like the council does, pretty much useless. Is that my time?
Yes, that's time.
Okay. Well, you go home a little bit earlier. Put this on your resume.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
May I?
Oh, yes.
Go for it.
Sorry. All right.
So thank you, Gary Cohen, Davidson County, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The whole concept of composting is of fascinating interest, and especially to the folks up on the Hill. And I can say that in our bill, and I'll just read you real quickly, it is the intent of the General Assembly that this part affect the development and implementation of a comprehensive approach to addressing packaging waste in the state, to include recovering valuable materials that would otherwise be lost to landfills, litter, and incineration while developing markets for these materials and supporting a circular economy in the state. I mention this because We follow the model of Colorado. Colorado passed EPR, Oregon passed EPR, and California. But we kind of, our bill was modeled after Colorado. It's much more business friendly. But in those 3 states, composting is very much a part of it. Okay. And in our discussions up on the Hill and among ourselves, we believe that composting is very much part of the solution. So we have recycling, obviously, of packaging. And I think it's important from a packaging guy, I want you to understand, there's packaging that we see in the supermarkets, okay? And that is really what our bill is focused on, helping to recycle, the stuff that you see in the supermarkets. Then there's that whole other silo of food waste. That material can be composted. But the issue is, are you going to have the producers of the packaging that, like the Mars and Yulee, fund composting? And they are doing it in other states. They will be doing it in other states. But I just wanted you to know that that is very much part of our legislation, or could be, and we want to engage in discussion on that. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions before he sits down this time? All right.
If you would just
Okay.
for a second, I wanted to clear things up on the public comment piece, because I didn't have that right at hand, and I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that, you know, I'm letting the board know what law it is that was being referred to. So House Bill 448 was passed. It's another word for it, or another thing it's called is the Tennessee Open Meetings Act, and it requires for public comment on specific agenda items, which is what we've done in this context, and it does permit governing bodies from putting reasonable restrictions on public comment. So I'm happy to discuss further if needed, but I wanted you guys to have that clarity moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, any additional questions for the board before I do the motion? No? Okay, we're gonna try this again. So I'd like to present a motion to approve the plan updated with numbers 1 and 2 on the screen today, with the request to bring item number 3 back to this body for holistic review of the plan with the environmental justice lens. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I was like, I can give it to you if you want to read it. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, is anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Is there any additional business that the board would like to discuss today? All right, if no business, then I'll present a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you so much for coming, everyone.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.